Hello, hello! Welcome back to Shieldmaiden in the Kitchen. My name is Terry, and today I'm going to show you how to make a recipe that I have made a bazillion times. It's something that we eat around here all the time, and so I could make this recipe without even looking at it anymore and have for years. It's just permanently ingrained in my memory, and I could probably make this in my sleep. It's really good, and it's really good for you, and it's quick, and it is homemade oat and nut granola. I know you do have a lot of choices for granola that are pretty convenient to buy in the grocery store, whether it's from the box or in bulk or in a bag, but I like to know what's in my food, and if I make it, I know what's in it. And also, it is a very quick process and it tastes great too. So I highly encourage you to not buy granola in the store at least once and try this recipe. So, all right, let's get started. For this recipe, first thing to do, oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Get out your all-purpose baking pan, like the one that you make cookies in. Get yourself a measuring cup so you can put some oil in it and also mix that with some honey. The oil I use is coconut oil, extra virgin coconut oil, but you could also use vegetable oil as well. Get yourself a large mixing bowl so you can mix the dry ingredients together. And of course the dry ingredients, primarily oats, nuts, and a little bit of coconut flake. I have also made this recipe using rolled barley as well, and it turns out just fine. So you could do that as an experiment. Another ingredient will be some cinnamon, and that is optional. You can put that in whether you want to or not. So let's get mixing. First thing we do, get our mixing bowl. 4 cups of rolled oats. Generally, I don't use quick cooking oats. I have done it in the past and it has worked relatively well, but I do prefer the plain rolled oats, organic rolled oats. Here, 4 cups, okay? And then again, I'm just doing a couple different types of nuts here, pecans and almonds. I have some leftover just almond slivers from the last time I made it, so I'm going to put that in, and what I roughly end up with is about, maybe 3/4 of a cup there, just to finish that off, so that works good. But I do have some blanched almonds here, now in a slightly different shape, some other types of slivers. And I'm going to put in maybe, again, about 3/4 of a cup of those. Then we have pecan pieces. And I'm going to put in about a cup of those. Like it nice and nutty. And then lastly, coconut flakes. And again, I've used various types of coconut flake. This is a flake that's slightly smaller, as you can see. I've used larger flakes, and I've also used shredded coconut. All of that works just fine. Adds the same amount of bulk, about a cup of whichever type you choose to use. A little bit of an overflowing cup there. But that's about it. And then I just gently mix all of that together in the bowl. And then I do like to add a little bit of cinnamon just for a little bit of flavor. And again, I kind of cuff the cinnamon like I do in lots of recipes. So just sort of sprinkle some over the top here, which I would imagine probably amounts to maybe a teaspoon and a half, something like that. And then we mix that in as well. And that's it for the dry ingredients. You can also very easily experiment with different types of spices as well. I suppose that would turn out really great. I think I've added nutmeg one time before, and again, that was fine. So it's all just to your taste. It's really, again, a very adaptable recipe that you can kind of play with. Okay, so now let's get to the wet ingredients now that we have the dry ingredients put together. Again, wet ingredients in this glass measuring cup, roughly a half or just slightly under a half cup of liquid oil of your choice. Again, I use extra virgin coconut oil, which also couples very nicely with the coconut flake to give it a little bit more of that kind of flavor in the finished granola. And then we'll top it off with honey, and you can use whatever type of honey you want. This honey I actually get from a professional beekeeper who keeps bees on our Christmas tree farm. So I know where it comes from, I know the bee producer, and it's really great honey. And so you can just pour it right in so that we are going to equal about 1 cup. There we go, 1 cup of the mix of oil and honey. And then I emulsify it, so mixing it with a wire whisk, whisk it together till it gets all mixed together, because again, because of the oil, it's kind of like oil and water where it likes to stay separated, but if you stir it vigorously enough, after a couple of minutes, it will begin to emulsify and come together. Here's our emulsified oil and honey, and we simply pour that into the dry ingredients. And begin to incorporate that, which takes a little bit of stirring and kind of moving it about to make sure you get everything thoroughly moistened, because the honey, of course, and the oil is a little bit thick and it kind of wants to clump together. So you use the spoon to sort of turn over, kind of almost like folding, turning over the granola mix and getting everything well spread out and well incorporated. And of course, now this is the time for the history lesson. Did the Vikings eat granola? That's a good question. And the truth is, we just don't know for sure. You might remember from an earlier video that I mentioned, during the Viking Age, at least for the first half or so, Vikings were largely an oral culture, meaning they weren't literate in the modern sense, and so they didn't leave us any written cookbooks or recipes so that we could know for sure. But historians like me can extrapolate and hypothesize based on food that we know they were growing in Scandinavia, and also things they could have traded for. Vikings were known to have gone far and wide in search of goods for trade into Europe, and also even as far as what is today the modern Middle East. And so we know that they could have had access to various nuts and spices that were in this recipe. They did cultivate oats and barley pretty widely in Scandinavia and even into Iceland during the Viking Age. So the basis of the recipe they definitely had access to. There were also wild hazelnuts that were growing in Scandinavia they could have added. They could have traded for almonds and walnuts and even chestnuts or other nuts. They could have traded for the spices, the cinnamon that we used. They could have done other types of spices, as you can in this recipe, such as cloves or nutmeg or anise seed. There's all kinds of options that they could have had as we do today. We also know that the Vikings had access to honey pretty widely. As a matter of fact, it's believed to have been their only sweetener. They also had access to fats, so the liquids that we used in this recipe to bring the dry mixture together is something that the Vikings definitely could have had access to. They also could have added dried fruits, which you can as well. I generally would do that at the end of the recipe. But the Vikings could have definitely used this, I imagine, as kind of a fast food. Because they were on the road a lot during the trading and raiding season, they would have needed stuff that was easy to put together and that it was easy to eat and portable. And so I imagine the Vikings kind of clumping together something like we did with this recipe, maybe baking it, maybe not baking it, and then eating it maybe kind of like a Viking aged granola bar. I bet the only thing they probably didn't have access to is the coconut, but otherwise I can imagine that they would have eaten something like this. So there you have it. We don't know for sure, but maybe it's a possibility. All right, so once that's very well mixed together, then we simply pour it out onto our sheet. spread it out very evenly. And for this very standard size cookie sheet, baking sheet, it, as you see, fills it up pretty completely. All right. And then this will go into the oven. Again, our oven is at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And it will bake in there for about 15 minutes. Then you can check it and we'll see how it's progressing at that time. 15 minutes have passed. Time to take a look. Starting to brown a little bit. And this is where we take the opportunity to just gently use our spoon to pull it towards the center, away from the edges, so the edges don't continue to get too much more browned than the rest of it. And just kind of mix it up also so that it doesn't stick, though it does have the oil in there in order to help with that. And then just spread it back out, and we'll give it another 10 minutes or so and see what we've got. 10 more minutes have passed. Beautiful, lovely golden brown granola. Nice and evenly browned across the tray. Great stuff. And again, I had that on 350 Fahrenheit, so a total of about 25 minutes. I did have my setting on regular bake, even though my oven has convection bake. I did not use the fan because I'm only baking this one tray this time. So regular bake setting seemed to work pretty well for this in my new Miele oven. And I let it sit now for a little bit, give it a little bit of a stir. You can kind of see it's lighter underneath, but it's definitely cooked. Keep it from sticking to the pan. And then just let it sit here in the tray for a while until it completely cools down. And once it completely cools down, put it into an airtight container and it will definitely last for a couple of weeks. Here's our Viking granola, ready to be enjoyed. If you make this recipe and you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. Or if you have questions about Vikings, feel free to leave those as well. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time when I have another Viking Age recipe for you, I will just say, see you later. Sjamst!